I welcome you all to the Saphira Center of Shamanism, where we break down the ancient technologies of shamanism and the occult, bringing them into balance with the deep psyche. My name is Luke, experienced practitioner and mentor of the shamanic and occult sciences. It's an honor to have you with me. Before I start this topic, if you have interest in working with me, definitely check out the links in the description of this video. My work is very much suited for those who are either going through shamanic or occult initiation, or who are wanting to adequately prepare for shamanic and occult initiation. You can do this through my membership programs, through the premium membership, first link in description, which is the Saphira Shamanic School, or you can join the Patreon, or you can work with me one-on-one through my healing and mentoring services. Definitely check those out if you feel the call. So on to today's topic. This is a topic that I tried to record yesterday. I was speaking for over an hour and it wasn't recording correctly. So I'm going to try again. Obviously the message was not right. And that is key traits for success in Qliphothic initiation. We're going to be delving in to the most important traits that you need to embody both before Qliphothic initiation, during your Qliphothic initiation, and after you have completed the initiatory system as well. This has very much been inspired by people who have been getting in touch with me recently wanting guidance on their Qliphothic process, some of which are already in the Qliphothic process, some of which are wanting to adequately prepare for their Qliphothic initiations. What I'm seeing amongst a lot of people is that there is still a lot of misinterpretation around what the Qliphoth really is from an initiatory standpoint. I mean, it's easy enough to understand practically, but many people are still confused around what the Qliphoth is really going to demand from them, what the real purpose of it is, and more than anything, how it is an ongoing system of intensive initiation that leads far beyond the tree structure itself. So we're going to be discussing in detail the most important traits that you need to embody in order to stay grounded throughout the process, in order to really integrate what comes up within the Qliphothic tree so that you don't do what a lot of people do, and that's just continuously cycle in ongoing trauma patterns and coping mechanisms, and ultimately how you can develop the necessary qualities to really carry this initiatory process forward and really be a conduit for this current. The Qliphoth is going to be a very important initiatory system that is going to play an extremely important role in the evolution of humanity in the coming times, but we need to shatter the illusions. We need to bring it out of just the left-hand path and black magical community, and we really need to kind of bring it into a space whereby there is real grounded information for people who are being guided towards this initiatory system, as it's a hell of a lot bigger than what a lot of people are explaining, even in books and on YouTube. So definitely stay tuned for the key traits that you need to embody to be successful in the Qliphothic process. So from my perspective, when it comes to distributing information on the Qliphoth, it's really about finding a balance. And what I'm really trying to do here is find a balance between really approaching it with the respect that it deserves, because it is an extremely powerful initiatory system that will completely uproot all aspects of your life and completely shift who you thought that you were into closer alignment with what your soul is here to be and embody. But I also don't want to completely cover it in fear-mongering like a lot of people do within these communities. So I'm going to really try and explain these core traits from a place that is optimally grounded so that you can make of these traits what you will, and so that by the end of this video you can know what the Qliphoth is really going to demand from you. This is not just for people who are thinking of going through the Qliphothic initiation, but even people who have been through the spheres or been through the tunnels of Set. This is also going to be a very important subject to really embody as well, because your initiations are not done. Speaking to those who I know have subscribed to me, who have been through the Qliphothic initiation, you are not done. Yeah, it is just the beginning for your process. Okay, so when we talk about the Qliphothic initiation, I'll show it here. I'm not going to explain in this video about the different stages of initiation, about the daemons in detail, because I've already explained that in previous videos, but I will just give an overview of it in case any viewers do not know. So initiation through the Qliphoth is one of the most powerful forms of occult initiation that you can go through. It's one of the more well-known systems of initiation within the black magic or left-hand path community. Left-hand path practices are focused around finding godhood from within the self, and focused on journeying back to the source on the microcosmic level. And the source in the Qliphothic concept and terminology is the void, the goddess, the empty space that birthed everything into being. So basically what the Qliphothic initiation does is that it's a big process of unmaking. It will take you on a journey of unmaking who you thought you were, and gradually initiating you back into a state of void consciousness. Okay, and that in itself is a piece of information that isn't really very well known when it comes to the Qliphothic initiatory process. The purpose of it is to return you to godhood, which is basically to decode you from your pre-constructed matrix, from your pre-constructed multiverse, in order to return you to the void state of consciousness. Okay, and as you go through the Qliphothic tree, you are going to basically be initiated into deeper layers of void consciousness. Okay, so the initiatory system goes quite simply from the bottom of the tree up to the top through the sphere workings. Okay, so with the Qliphoth, depending on what initiatory system and path working that you do, normally the Qliphoth spheres are actually undertaken separately from the tunnels, which are the pathways that you can see in this diagram interconnecting the different spheres. So typically you would initiate through each of the spheres one by one, going from the first sphere of Lilith or Nehimoth up to Gamaliel, to Samael, to Arabzarak, to Thagirion, to Golachab, to Ga'ag-Shibla, crossing the Abyss, which is the cutoff point, that transition through the liminal gateway into Sitra Ara, the other side, what Kenneth Grant will call Universe B, into the supernal triad to shatter the illusions of gnosis, understanding, and wisdom, and finally to shatter the illusion of divinity as a whole. After that, you then transition through each of the tunnels of Set, which are a form of void-like consciousness. There is no set pathway between any of the Qliphothic spheres. The Qliphothic spheres are regions within the primordial chaos that resonate with the different portions of the human nervous system. And to initiate through the pathways, or should I say the tunnels, or some call them the caverns of Choronzon, to initiate through the pathways is basically to illuminate the different spaces between the spheres that you've already opened up, so that those spheres are able to function effectively in your ongoing initiatory process. So initiating through the spheres is like awakening the energy centers or building the computer generators, and then going through the tunnels of Set is like basically wiring the nervous system. Okay, the tunnels of Set are basically the nervous system for this technology to be able to function effectively, so that the life force energy is able to stream freely through all of these different spheres, all of these different energetic centers, if we translate it to the nervous system. Okay, so as you go deeper into your Qliphothic process, you are going to embody a deeper state of void consciousness. The Qliphothic tree that you see here is only the beginning of the initiatory process, and this alone is information that many people don't fully understand until they have gone through all of the spheres, because barely anyone mentions it. There's only one person I've seen on YouTube who actually speaks about the process that unfolds after you have completed the Qliphothic spheres. Okay, it is a much bigger process of initiation that is going to unfold for the rest of your life. So the Qliphoth is really something that you do not just to get through the tree. Okay, you don't just do it to get through it and then, oh, it's done. Okay, what you're doing here is that you are committing yourself to becoming a leader. You are saying to your soul that you are ready to become a leader. Okay, the Qliphoth is for those who are ready to lead. Okay, and this does not mean becoming, say, a cult leader. Okay, what this basically means, becoming a leader in this concept is, or in this context, is a leader not only of your own life, but also becoming a conduit for this primal current of energy to flow through you to also those around you as well. At this moment in time, as much as the Qliphothic process is becoming more popular and it's starting to reach communities that are beyond the left-hand path or the black magical communities, it's still the vast minority of the collective consciousness at this moment in time that are actually going through this initiatory process and actually utilizing it for what it is actually here to do. Okay, so the Qliphothic process is very cool. Okay, the tree is very cool, very edgy. It takes you extremely deep. It works extremely quickly. You will start to change thoroughly and extremely quickly as you go through the Qliphothic tree. The deeper you go or the further you go up that tree, the more in alignment you are going to fall with void consciousness, which means that you are not going to live a life of certainty. Okay, and this is a big one with the Qliphothic process. Okay, there have been people who have got in touch with me recently who have said that they're going into the Qliphoth to heal, which is valid, yeah, and that is the purpose of the Qliphoth. However, it is much more than just a healing process. Okay, the Qliphothic process is primal evolution. Primal evolution that is designed specifically for you to return to void consciousness, which means if you are going into the Qliphoth seeking set clarity or certainty in regards to your evolutionary path, the Qliphoth is not going to give you certainty. Okay, what it's going to do is gradually initiate you deeper into uncertainty. Okay, because we're not exploring light matter realms here. Okay, it's not like the tree of life. The tree of life, you're initiating through it, you're gaining more clarity as you go up the tree, and then by the time you've finished the tree, you've kind of activated the light aspects of these energetic centers and planetary gateways in order to establish greater order and communion with the divine. That's the purpose of the tree of life. It feels more complete. You get to the end of the Qliphoth, it's not like that because you're exploring dark matter realms. You're exploring realms of primordial chaos that are intangible in nature. So as much as the Qliphoth will present immense opportunity for real epic shadow integration and, you know, extreme healing to really take place, it's not going to give you certainty. What it's really going to do is that it's going to drastically sensitize your system, because what you're doing here is that you're breaking through dormant energetic centers. What you're doing when you're opening the Qliphothic spheres and given pathways or tunnels is that you are opening up dormant energetic centers within your nervous system. And that basically means that when that energetic center is open, it's going to flow through your body, and then you're going to go through a process of transmutation, shedding the illusion that is stopping you from embracing the real power and potential that has been encased underneath that residual energy and unprocessed trauma. And each stage of the initiation is going to do that in a different way. So the further you go up that tree, the more sensitive you are going to become as a person. You're going to become extremely psychically perceptive as well. It's also going to stream through to also psychic abilities, being able to perceive energy on an extremely deep level, because you are accepting the paradox of descent. Okay, and this is a really important message for anybody who is wanting to initiate into the Qliphoth or is going through the Qliphothic initiation at this time, and that is the fact that the descent into the underworld is paradoxical in nature. Okay, because we are initiating into the void, when we go through the Qliphothic process. The first or the lower seven spheres are shedding the illusions that are blocking that void consciousness, and then traveling through the abyss, through the liminal gateway, is a process of merging with the void and transitioning into what we call Citra Ara, or the night side, which is the void state of consciousness. Okay, and then when you reach the supernal triad, you go through a significant process of shattering the illusions of wisdom and understanding, shattering the illusions of gnosis altogether, and really training yourself to really be receptive and receive true gnosis, not by actually going outside of yourself. Okay, once you've shattered those illusions of duality and those illusions of divinity, you then enter the void. Okay, you enter the void, you enter the trans-Qliphothic realms, which is the void beyond all set form. And that means that you're then going to go through deeper initiations that are going to transmute what you have gained throughout the Qliphothic process even more. Okay, it's going to develop it. So basically, the Qliphoth is only the training ground for the initiatory process that you're going to go on. In the Qliphoth, you're learning how to embody the necessary qualities and traits, which I'll talk through in a moment, that are going to lead you beyond the tree and into greater integration of that godhood, which basically means of that void consciousness into your day-to-day life. So it is important to understand that it does have a paradoxical effect. When we are descending into the darkness, we are recovering true light, which means that you are going to become more in resonance with true, authentic light matter energy. Whereas everything around you that you see, particularly, within the spiritual community and within the world around you, it's all pre-constructed light matter, which means that it can very easily fall under the illusion of seeking. And if you're seeking something to define your sense of self, that basically means that that is false light. Okay, you're going outside of yourself to find light, then that's false light. The purpose of the Qliphoth, the purpose of the black flame, of the black light, is to recover the true light, recover your true value that was far beyond anything that can be placed into a box and defined by a simple mask or role. So the initiation into the void is paradoxical in nature. Okay, you enter that void consciousness. Once you've activated all of those centers, you then need to learn how to dwell within the void space whilst being in a physical body. And that is the nature of the trans-Qliphothic initiation, which unfolds after the tree structure itself. Okay, so many people don't understand this when they get into this initiatory process. They think, I'm going to get through the tree and then that's it done. But what you're doing is that you are transitioning, inverting your entire system, and are returning to a space of optimal meaninglessness. Okay, and that is the void. So that means that if you're going into the Qliphoth seeking set clarity, and you're seeking a process that is optimal healing, and then you're going to be done after, this is not the process for you. Okay, if you think that you are going to be done by the end of your Qliphothic process, you're going to be in for a nasty shock. Okay, it's important to understand that many people frame the Qliphothic process as dangerous in its own right, and they say that, oh yeah, once you get to the abyss, or once you get to a certain point in the process, then it's the kind of cut-off point, and this is where a lot of people are unsuccessful. I respectfully disagree with that. Okay, in my experience, what I've seen also with other practitioners is that they go through the Qliphothic process, they integrate it to the capacity that they are able to, and then they enter the trans-Qliphothic initiation, be it consciously or unconsciously, and that is where a lot of people end up failing. Okay, so it's not the Qliphothic process that actually triggers the most failure or triggers the most repetitive trauma cycle. I feel it's after, because you've opened up all of these centers, drastically sensitized your nervous system, and then you need to go through a bigger transmutation process that is not set in stone, that is not clearly definable, and that you can't actually pinpoint to like, oh, I'm in this sphere, so what I'm experiencing must be a result of this sphere. Okay, so the Qliphothic process is just the training ground for showing you how to emit the necessary qualities to be able to become a leader. And that leads me on to the first trait. Because the Qliphoth is built to turn you into a leader and is built for those who are ready to step into leadership, it means that you need to take accountability. Okay, you need to be ready to take responsibility for yourself and not just hide behind the masks of vulnerability and taking responsibility for yourself. Okay, you're going through the process. If you're really integrating the process, you are going to be taken through deep processes of integration whereby you are facing personifications of unprocessed trauma, which is what the daemons are if you translate it to if you translate it in Jungian terms, the Qliphothic spirits that you encounter are personifications of what has been unprocessed within you. And each one is going to rule over something that is relating to your own sovereignty and your ability to be a leader. So what happens when you initiate into a Qliphothic sphere is that you're going to go through a series of trials that are going to be a manifestation of that given consciousness or archetypal energy, and you are going to be shown how you can integrate that. Okay, and you have free will. Okay, nothing changes unless the practitioner is willing to change. Okay, nothing changes within the Qliphothic process. Yes, you get pushed into places where often you have to change, but you still have free will. Yeah, that's the laws of the multiverse that we are dwelling within. We have free will. That is what they call the divine plan, free will to in order for the source to define a meaning for itself. So that basically means that you can either adapt to the Qliphothic process or you can choose not to and then put more strain on your system as a result of that. I will go as far as to say that many people do not integrate, what the Qliphothic process is doing, and it shows in the way that they speak about the Qliphoth. Okay, anybody who tries to gatekeep the information, who tries to, fearmonger you into not doing it, is that a sign of somebody who has integrated, the lessons within this tree? Not in my view. This is a sign of somebody who has got severe self-worth issues that they haven't processed, and they are operating from a place of false sovereignty, very much what I call getting stuck in Gagiel, stuck in this space of I've attained this, and they're living a life that is built off of a massive illusion of grandeur. Okay, so really keep an eye out for certain people who try and put you off this initiatory process, because this is not a sign of somebody who has gone through and integrated the process in their own way. It is a sign of somebody who is potentially spiraling in ways that are not helpful. All you have to do is look at the energy field of a lot of these different practitioners and who claim to have been through the Qliphoth. You tap into the energy field and you can feel internal conflict. You can feel repressed aspects of the self playing out. Yeah, and that's when dark matter initiation does, cause more stress to the nervous system, because you're going through it, whether it's to gain power or to tell yourself that you've been through something like this, but really it's missing the point, which is optimal primal integration. Okay, so really with the Qliphothic process, it's absolutely essential to really go into it from a place of accountability. Okay, go into it from a place of really being willing to take responsibility for what the daemons show you. Okay, because the daemons at the end of the day are just personifications of what is unprocessed within you, and when you integrate them and take them as a part of you, what you're then doing is that you are integrating those different parts that are behind and represented by that archetypal energy, and then you will be granted access to the sacred energy that dwells within each portion of the tree. For example, Asmodeus. I love Asmodeus. I talk about Asmodeus a lot. Asmodeus, outer layer, is a personification of everything about humanity that many people have a lot of resistance to: violence, aggression, violation, All of these things is what, or vengeance, all of these things is what Asmodeus represents. So what happens when you go into Golachab? You face Golachab, you face Asmodeus, you face these impulses, and you flow with the current. And what happens after that is that you tap into the passion that's underneath. Okay, you process deep-rooted rage and anger, let it come to the surface, and you take Asmodeus as a part of you. What then happens is that you tap into what Asmodeus is actually gatekeeping, and the whole reason why he's putting you through these trials in the first place is to give you access to what he is gatekeeping, and that is passion. Okay, so understand that there is a paradoxical energy within each portion of the Qliphoth itself. That when you go into the Qliphoth, you will experience the energies in a way that that you need to grow and evolve, and you may get archetypal manifestations in your day-to-day life that are mirrors of what that spirit is trying to show you. Okay, mirrors of the trauma that the spirits are showing you, and really sort of indicating that you need to integrate. When you integrate it, you gain access to the paradox of that energy, which will always be the opposite of what that sphere represents. Okay, so you tap into Golachab, you feel all of these violent, aggressive, and violation-based impulses that you haven't been owning. You face your anger, you face your rage. What happens when you integrate that is that you tap into the opposite, which is passion. Okay, and it's like that with all of the spheres. So really going into it from a place of being willing to take accountability for these different parts of yourself, being willing to take these different spirits as aspects of you, and not to operate from the illusion of separation. Okay, many people go into the Qliphoth, which is a realm that has been separated. Yeah, we're dealing with forces and working with forces that are separated from the cosmos itself and perceive themselves as separate. So the real trials and what they're really initiating you out of is the illusion of separation as a whole. And that's what happens when you integrate these different daemonic entities and these archetypal forces, is that you are shattering the illusion of separation as a whole, and then are journeying back to the source. That's the whole purpose of the Qliphothic initiation, but that cannot happen if you don't take accountability. Okay, and being a leader means taking responsibility and accountability for your different traumas and for your limitations, for your failings, so that you can then forge your path in a way that works for you. And that void consciousness is not a clear path. It's no definitive path. Okay, this is why it's initiation into leadership, because you're shattering the illusion of all of the paths that everybody else has walked. And then you are learning to forge your own path from that void consciousness. And that cannot happen if you don't take accountability. What many people do is that they go into these Qliphothic processes, they face these different spirits, and what then happens is that they then use them to feed separation. Yeah, so that's not a sign of integration. It causes them to perceive themselves as more separate from the rest of humanity, and then they then end up operating within this sort of narcissistic bubble. Yeah, and that is not a sign of integration of these energies. So accountability is absolutely essential. Adaptability is the next one. Okay, because the Qliphoth is there to initiate you back into your godhood, back into your true void consciousness that has always been you on the soul level, but your ego doesn't recognize that state. You have to be willing to adapt. Okay, and the whole purpose of the Qliphoth is basically to shift your life into a structure that supports continuous evolution. How does that differ from how the majority of the collective structures their lives? Most people structure their lives in a patriarchal format, okay, which means they build a tower, a solid structure that's associated with how they feel obliged to be and what they feel they need to emanate in the world. What then happens when they go through an inevitable rebirth process is that that whole tower has to come crashing down in order for a new structure to be built. Okay, that is patriarchal in nature. Okay, the purpose of the Qliphoth is to shift your state of being into a fluid existence, yeah, which means that you embody a state of being which is much more aligned to the primordial serpent energy, which is continuous shedding, continuous death and rebirth. Okay, another way of looking at this from a shamanic perspective will be the flow of the four seasons and the four elements. Okay, everything being birthed in spring, experiencing itself in summer, dying in winter, and then rebirthing. So the purpose of the Qliphoth is to shift your consciousness into a fluid state of being, shift your life structure into a fluid structure that supports your continuous evolution. Okay, so you have to be willing to adapt. My personal viewpoint is that if you are already living a reality whereby your life is fluid in nature, which means that, you're kind of, you're not sort of tied to, a set job working this amount of hours, and everybody's process is different. But my opinion on this personally is that if you are already in a fluid state of consciousness and your lifestyle already supports continuous evolution, then I personally feel that your journey into the Qliphoth may be a little bit easier compared to somebody who does not have that fluid structure in life. The reason for that is because the Qliphoth is going to unmake you, which means if you go into it with a solid patriarchal structure, and many people may even think, oh, I've got a fluid lifestyle, yeah, but not everything is as it seems on the surface. Yeah. So if you're going into it, from a place whereby you're already unfulfilled, you're consistently unfulfilled in relationships, you're in a job that you severely dislike, you're living a life of obligation, then what the Qliphoth is then going to do is that it's going to gradually, and it may happen in one big tower moment, which can happen as well, is that you'll enter that first sphere and then everything will just get uprooted. And then there's a lot more materially that needs to fall away in order to clear space for the evolutionary potential that you're needing to embody to take you through the rest of the tree and beyond. So already embodying that adaptability before you go into the tree is extremely important. Yeah, acknowledge that you are going to change. Yeah, whereas if you go into it from the perspective of, you've already got a lot of attachments, you haven't really done any work on these attachments, you're not aware of these attachments, you've got addictions, what will likely happen is that you will enter the Qliphoth and then it will enhance this massively, and it may bring up emotions and feelings that you are not adequately prepared to deal with and face. And that's when it can put stress on the nervous system, and that's when people don't actually integrate anything at all within the Qliphothic realms. So that adaptability is absolutely essential. It's comparable to if you are, say, in a space where you're feeling quite depressed or you're feeling a lot of grief, and then you take a psychedelic like magic mushrooms. What will very likely happen is that it will enhance those feelings. It will enhance where you are. You drink ayahuasca, the ayahuasca is going to take you into your own personal internal structure that is going to be resonant with what is already within your energy field and the things that have already been within your awareness. That's why people often have to diet before they do an ayahuasca journey, because the ayahuasca takes them into what is a lot of the things that have been in their field recently. It's much the same with the Qliphothic process. It's a little bit like being on a psychedelic journey, just without, I mean, it's very otherworldly, don't get me wrong, but it is comparable to a continuous sort of psychedelic journey from a self-development perspective. So you go into it, you're sensitizing the nervous system, it's going to bring up what's already there that you're potentially masking through unhealthy coping mechanisms. And these coping mechanisms are not just smoking, alcohol, drugs. It's not just that, it's not just, sex, those, typical addictions, but it can be anything from, say, scrolling, it can be anything that is there to kind of separate you from your vulnerability. These are the things that the Qliphoth is going to inevitably bring up for you, and you have to be willing to adapt. But if your lifestyle is already in a fluid and adaptable state, then I personally feel that that will give you a big head start within the Qliphothic process as a whole. So adaptability is absolutely essential. Persistence. Okay, as I've mentioned, the Qliphothic process is not something that you should do to get through it. Okay, and this is where a lot of people fall short, or they rush through the initiatory process. They may rush through all of the spheres. Yeah, but then what's going to happen following that process? What's then going to happen is that they're going to move into the trans-Qliphothic realms and everything's going to come up twice as strong. Basically, approach the Qliphoth, approach the void from a place of merging. Allow yourself to swim within the primordial waters of that existed before all of creation. That's what the Qliphoth really is. When you move into a sphere, sink into the sphere. Don't go into the sphere to get through the sphere. Big mistake. Go into the sphere to become the sphere. Okay, become the spirit. Merge with the spirit. Absorb all of these energies. There's a reason why this is often seen as a vampiric form of initiation, because you are shifting from being a seeker into a receiver. So you're going through, you're bringing all of these cosmic energies into your body, into your nervous system, and you are learning how to process them. Big mistake that people make is going into them, not wanting to stay in a place and then rushing through it. I do admit that there are some points on the journey that you will go through quicker than others. Okay, there are some spheres that you will go through quicker than others. For myself, for example, I initiated into Gamaliel and I said to myself, I'm going to stay here for a long time. I was in Gamaliel for about a month, and then I had a dream that I initiated into Samael, the next sphere, and then I woke up and I felt the energy of Samael. Okay, and then tuned in and I'm like, okay, what just happened is that Samael was like, I'm ready for you, and Lilith was like, I'm done with you. So there's only so much conscious control that you have, but what many people do is rush through the spheres. They go through the spheres too quickly, and they go into it from the perspective of needing to get through it. I do believe that the concept of the only way out is through is absolutely important for the Qliphothic process, but you don't want to just be forging the path forward and not being present with where you are. Okay, so it's absolutely essential to go into it from a space of persistence, understanding that you're opening yourself up to a level of void consciousness that you are never going to escape. It's just going to get stronger and stronger as you go through the process. Okay, you're going to become more and more sensitive as you go through the process. This requires persistence. It's not for you if you're like, okay, I'm going to do it and then that's it, done, my self-development is done. That's not how this works. Okay, once you have started the Qliphothic process, you cannot back out. You have now willingly opened the door to these initiatory energies to flow through you, and you have to flow with this current now. So that's where adaptability is important, but persistence is also essential. Persistence not just to get through the tree, but persistence for the rest of your life. Persistence for the ongoing void initiations that are going to take place beyond the tree itself. So really having that persistence and not, very much embodying that sort of gentle warrior energy and resilient energy and perseverance, to really flow through the process. Because at the end of the day, this is draconian initiation. You are making a commitment to become a primordial dragon, which is basically working intensely with the serpentine energy, and you are merging with your primal self. And that primal self does not grow to a point and then stop growing. It continuously sheds its skin. That's what the primordial serpent does. And that's going to continue to happen beyond the tree itself. So persistence going into this is absolutely essential. If you are not willing to commit your entire life to this level of intensive self-development, forget about it. Yeah, forget about it. Don't go into the Qliphoth if you are unsure. If you are unsure, don't bother going into it. Okay. The next trait is trust. Don't go into the Qliphoth if you don't trust it. If you don't trust demonic spirits, if you don't trust night side energies, if you don't trust darkness, I wouldn't go into it personally. It's not to say that if you don't trust the energies initially, then you won't initiate successfully. It's all subjective and relative. It's according to the person. But you have got to bear in mind that trust is going to guide you through. What many people do is that they speak about the Qliphothic process in a way that is very much fear-mongering. And then what happens is that people then go into it from a space of not trusting the process. So from the get-go, they've heard from somebody else that this is something to be feared and it's going to be really, really painful. Then they go into it from resistance. They go into it not trusting the spirits. And that's when it can fall into territory of blaming something outside. And when I was in the abyss, I very much fell into that as well. I was blaming a lot of people around me, for my own internal process. And it's very easy to do that because when you're going through dissolution, the ego is holding on. Yeah. So it's going to try and find something outside to blame, to project blame into in order to hold on. So what happens with many people if they don't fully trust the spirits and the structure of the Qliphoth itself, or should I say the anti-structure of the Qliphoth itself, is that people can start to blame the energies. Yeah, people can start to blame the spirits for what it is that they're experiencing. And that is then going to create more and more resistance throughout the process. So you should only go into this Qliphothic process if you have really taken time to study the tree, if you have really taken the time to, invoke the spirits, sit with some of the spirits, and you're comfortable with working with dark matter energy. Beyond that, you shouldn't attempt it. Okay, because if you don't have trust, or particularly if you're going into it with unconscious religious programming, you're going into a realm which is literally going to devour that in extremely savagely in that respect. So you do have to have the optimal trust in the forces that you're working with, and ultimately approach them from the perspective of knowing that they are aspects of you. As much as they're their own beings, they're older than any of us know, they are aspects of you. You are only facing yourself. The next one, the next trait, is controversial and is one that many people struggle with, myself included, going through this process. Gentleness is an essential trait. Gentleness. I said it, we're working with dark matter spirits. We're working with spirits that are notoriously tangible and at times aggressive, but it's important to understand that we are working intensely with the inner child here. The purpose of initiating into the void is to understand your value beyond the predefined masks and roles, understand your true value beyond all of that. That's the real purpose of it. And what is that associated with? It's the inner child, the soul's essence. Understanding that the inner child doesn't want to be anything really, because even trying to be something specific is trying to force the inner child into something. And many people go into this initiatory process with this outer layer warrior energy, which looks really good on the outer layer. It's an amazing mask. It's a convincing one, that's for sure. But it requires gentleness. It requires sitting with the inner child. Whereas if you're going, invoking all of these spirits, doing all of these path workings, and you're again embodying that seeker consciousness, I encourage you to really look at the real intention behind doing that. On the surface, it may be evolutionary, and that's great. It serves its purpose. But be honest with yourself and really ask, is there any form of me trying to mold my inner child into something specific because deep down I don't feel enough? Because your value was always there. Your value exists within the void. Your value is everything. Your true value is what you face when you go into the void. Your true value is what you face when you go into the Qliphoth. It's an initiation back into value that is not defined or attained by anything that is outside of you. So you have to approach that with gentleness. If you don't approach it with gentleness, then you go into it trying to force your inner child to be something specific, trying to force the different aspects of you to embody something specific. And then you have to ask yourself the question, when in your past were you made to do things that you didn't want to do? When in your past were you as a child, pushed into situations that, or bulldozed into situations that you didn't want to be in? It's exactly the same concept here. And this is one of the most common things that I see with people going into the Qliphoth. They go into it thinking that evolution is suffering. Suffering is not evolution. The Qliphoth does not want you to suffer. The Qliphoth is not a punishment. Your evolution is not defined by how much you suffer. If you suffer time and time again, the continuous things, continuously in the same ways, that is not evolution. That is at your evolutionary detriment. And this is where the Qliphoth can move into a space of being at your evolutionary detriment and not actually serving your evolution long term. So this is an important thing to really understand and ground. Gentleness is essential. If you do not approach your inner child and these realms with gentleness and you're going into it forcing alchemy, you're going to make yourself more separate. And that is what happens with the majority of people. They don't integrate the separation. They become the separation. And that is not evolution. You're going into realms that are initiating you out of the illusion of separation entirely, helping you to understand your separation from the void, from your own godhood. But instead, you are then cycling in the illusion of separation because you're not going into it to be more vulnerable. You're going into it to force your inner child to be something specific, when eventually you have to let that go anyway. And this is something that you will either come to terms with whilst in the tree itself. The abyss was the cutoff point for me, the abyss going into Satariel. Or you will get it beyond the tree in a way that is more harsh. And again, this is where many people do fall into unhealthy coping strategies and trauma cycles because they are not approaching their inner child with gentleness. So gentleness within these Qliphothic realms is absolutely essential, extremely important to embody, as that's the core of evolution, is gentleness, integration. And it really sort of helps you to look at in many ways, particularly like between the abyss and Satariel, going into Satariel, it's like shifting the veils of illusion, understanding on a deeper level what is real gnosis and what isn't. And when you really face that and are willing to integrate these different aspects of yourself that are beyond these illusions, you will realize that many people, even people who go into the darker Qliphothic realms, are still operating from false light, from the illusion of gnosis, from gnosis that isn't actually real gnosis, from gnosis that they are cultivating in order to force their inner child to be something specific. And again, this is where it puts more strain on the nervous system as a whole. The next trait that is essential to embody is acceptance. Sounds simple, but it's not so simple in the process. Okay, so we've already spoken about leadership, which is associated with accountability, persistence, adaptability, trust, and gentleness. We need to speak about acceptance. Going into the space of the Qliphothic realms, the key to success, once you've got all of these other qualities, the key to success is acceptance. Accept whatever it is that you see. And acceptance has different layers to it. Okay, acceptance can come through in ways of accepting where you failed, accepting your state of being. Particularly when it comes to encountering inevitable resistance, you can be in resistance to this process and not even realize it. It's accepting where you are, accepting the resistance. Okay, and this is where the fear mongering is even more dangerous because it pushes you away from acceptance because it's like, oh, you don't want to get stuck in the abyss. Oh, you don't want to stagnate, all of this stuff. It pushes people away from acceptance and causes them to go into the space of needing to control. Okay, I need to make sure that I don't get stuck in the abyss. I need to make sure that I don't stagnate within the Qliphoth and get stuck in the spheres. Okay, it's an extremely fluid process. Fluidity is the key. And in order to embody that fluidity, it's really accepting wherever it is that you are. Okay, accepting that realistically you need to embody that optimal acceptance for where you are, optimal acceptance for anything that you're feeling. And this comes from really understanding that every emotion, every feeling, every state of being that you embody, not just in the Qliphoth, but in your day-to-day life, is completely valid, no matter how dark or twisted it is, no matter how angry it is, no matter how fearful it is, no matter how much pain it feels. The worst thing that we do is try and ignore it and push through it. Okay. And that again links to gentleness. And the key to gentleness is acceptance, accepting wherever it is that you are. Okay. You are not going to encounter things within the Qliphoth that are going to be aligned to what you thought you encountered. Okay. You may think that you will have certain experiences in the Qliphoth or certain things will happen, but it's not, it's going to happen in a way that you're not going to be able to predict or know. So it's acceptance of that unknown, which is absolutely essential, and just being willing to accept whatever it is that comes to the surface for you. Okay, be willing to accept that, oh, okay, I've been living a big illusion of grandeur for most of my life. Okay, fine. Or, even when you get beyond the abyss, the realizations that come through that make you realize that, what has really been driving you, particularly in Satariel, with, false gnosis and false understanding, thinking that you've been understanding things, but really you haven't, understanding where you have been imprisoning your own inner child. It's really acceptance that is the key to all of that. Yeah, and if you go into it from the perspective of looking at certain things and are like, actually, no, it's not like that. I know better, or I know this better. You have to accept that your free will takes you so far. Your free will initiates the process. But beyond that, your soul has other ideas. And the whole purpose of the Qliphoth, in a way, is to align to your true will that exists within the void, which means that you have to accept what you don't know. Acceptance of what you don't know, of what cannot be known, acceptance of a state of being that is associated with no certainty at all. Accept the fact you are not going to get certainty from this path. The only certainty that you need is real certainty, which is of your own sovereignty, of your own power, of your own potential. Beyond that, in terms of certainty as to where the path is going to lead, what path to walk down, none of it is going to make any logical sense. Okay, you get beyond Darth, none of it makes any sense past Darth. Yeah, past Darth, you have to shatter the illusion of sense altogether. That's Satariel. Initiate through Satariel, you're peeling away the veils of illusion, showing yourself, showing you on a deeper level what you have been classing as true understanding, but isn't actually understanding, but is actually placing your own true will into a box through the illusion of knowing. So real acceptance on different levels, acceptance of the emotions, acceptance of the process, and acceptance of the fact that every aspect of knowing, past knowing your true sovereignty, knowing your worth, knowing your value beyond the masks, the rest of it is an illusion. The whole world has been built off of an inverted patriarchal system that imprints the illusion of knowing. And you can see by world events that reality is shattering. That reality, that false idea of knowing is gradually shattering into a million pieces. And this is why the Qliphoth is going to play an extremely important role within the coming times. It's why it's going to play an extremely essential role for those who are ready for it. Not everyone in this lifetime is made to go through this process. Not everyone is ready to become a leader. Okay, you may think that you're ready to become a leader. Not everybody is ready to do that. A lot of people are going to find it easier and are going to continue to follow gurus, going to continue to follow specific teachers, going to continue to worship external divinities in order to feel enough. All of these things. The Qliphoth, you have to get rid of all of that illusion. Okay, and you have to be willing to lead, and part of that leadership is being willing to, as I mentioned, forge your own path from within the void, which means that you have to follow your heart. Because when you go through dark matter initiation of this capacity, of this intensity, what's going to happen is that, yeah, your sort of tangible vision ahead of you is going to massively cloud. It's going to become extremely misty, which means that you have to navigate life from a heart center. That's the whole purpose of going through the abyss initiation, shattering the masks so that then sets the foundation for you navigating the void space and cultivating what it is that you need on the evolutionary level from the void space. So a big aspect of the process is accepting the fact that you are never going to know certain things. Okay, and illusions of grandeur can form. You can think that you've come further than you have, particularly crossing the abyss. You can think, oh yeah, no, I've just crossed the abyss. I've just done the core of the work. Big mistake. Yeah, and then Satario may test you through those illusions of grandeur, may test you through false light. And I feel that many people don't even get past Satario personally. Yeah, I feel most people just stay within the false light of Satario and then force their way through Gagiel and then integrate Thalmiel and then go through Thalmiel and then they're just stuck in that same place of, you know, of illusion of grandeur. I've crossed the abyss, but really what I can see is that okay, they've crossed the abyss, they've gone through this big process, but then, you know, they're still operating from that false light. They're still operating from that space of I've achieved this and nobody else can achieve it, which is in a sense getting stuck in Satariel. Okay, for those who don't know, in this diagram, the Satario is the top sphere on the dark pillar of severity. So it's the divine feminine, the dark womb, the inversion of Binah, so the inversion of understanding. You face the veils of illusions there, you know, and you have to shatter the illusion of false light, and you may gain what you think is your true will from that initiatory process, but later down the line you will find out that that is not the full capacity of your true will. A lot of it is understanding that there is only going to be so much that you are able to perceive whilst tethered to a physical body, and the acceptance of the unknowns within this journey is really what is going to guide you through, because it's going to become less and less known, less and less tangible, and that's real evolution. That's real evolution. It really shows you what real sovereignty is, and real sovereignty is not controlling. It's not having optimal control over everything that's happening in your life. It is understanding your own godhood and potential and letting that true essence guide your process. Okay, allowing yourself to see only with your heart. That's the real purpose. Not the illusion of, oh, I see what the next journey is, I see what the next path is. All of that has to go. You finish Thalmiel, you go into the Qliphothic initiation, all of that has to go. Let it all go, accept what you can't know, and let yourself be guided by your heart's essence. So to summarize, if I can remember what the things that I've just listed, we started with leadership, accountability, essential. Going into the Qliphoth, being willing to take responsibility for yourself. Persistence. You're never going to hear the end of it. So abandon that. If you're not willing to commit to this for the rest of your life, don't bother going into it. Okay, just don't bother. Adaptability. Being willing to adapt to the process, being willing to restructure your reality into a fluid structure and state of being that supports your ongoing evolution. We then have gentleness, the most bypassed in the Qliphothic tree, the most bypassed in the occult community and in all self-development. Do not force your inner child into this process. Go into it with gentleness, approach your inner child with open arms, and go into it with optimal receptivity without feeling like you need to control the process, because you'll get to a point where you cannot control it anymore. Trust. Optimal trust in the initiatory process, in the daemons, in the forces that you're working with is essential. You don't have that trust, It's going to be very difficult at certain times because you are going to have the illusion of knowing shattered altogether. So you have to trust yourself and you have to trust the spirits that you are working with. Otherwise, don't go into it. And finally, we have acceptance. The key to real alchemy and integration is accepting every emotion, every feeling, understanding it's all valid, and most importantly, accepting what you cannot control, accepting what cannot be known, and finding true and genuine integration within the void, within what cannot be known, within what cannot be accurately described. So I think that's everything that I needed to speak about in today's video. Very juicy subject, very important subject. A lot of the work that I do is associated with assisting people with preparing for this process. So if you're going through the Qliphoth or you're wanting to go through the Qliphoth and you want to book a mentorship or you want to join memberships, links are in the description. If you have any questions, do feel free to get in touch. But for now, thank you guys. If this video was helpful to you, definitely hit like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.